is a gathering of old friends, I can tell. Old friends and colleagues. Well, it's just a pleasure to invite everyone to another Year of Teacher Education event. And we're absolutely delighted that Dr. Judy Calvert and Dr. Linda Kaiser are here to share the work that they've been doing around inquiry. Hopefully we can have a dialogue with some of the work that we've been doing around inquiry. And we're just delighted because you bring really a sense of what's going on out there, and that's really helpful for us in here. So welcome, and we're very pleased.
Linda and I are both UBC grads, and we also taught in the master's program. Meredith was one of our students, as was Frank's son. So we have deep connections with UBC, and to be here is really, really special for us. So I know we've just got an hour, and we want to make this as meaningful to you as possible and also as interactive as possible. So we've got 4 questions that we thought we would well, we have 4 questions that aren't going to come up, but
Keith, do you want to get the other one ready in case?
You know, this moving back and forth between systems is always fun, but we've been working with a network of inquiry for 13 years in BC. And it really started with the opportunity to say, how can we get teachers to voluntarily become more involved with formative assessment? And out of that sprung kind of our 13-year passion and commitment that is not even close to ending, because we see that it's just so important. So we've been working with networks of schools, that's principal-teacher teams, across the province in a variety of ways. And the purpose has been to engage teachers in inquiry around practice and to make formative assessment and deeper forms of learning a way of life in the schools. So one of our questions for today is really what are the goals of this network? And we have 3. And we'll invite you to think about these and wonder whether we're on the same planet or not. Okay?
Yeah. I mean, some of you know a little bit about
Lydia, you have to take the mic.
Oh, no. I don't have that. I know it's very sensitive. Some of you know a lot about the network. Some of you have been in the network. I just want you to turn to the person next to you and say, I already know a lot about the network. I could say what the 3 goals are, and I know all about the spiral. Or, I've never heard of the network. I just thought it would be interesting. I saw that there was technology, and I thought I'd wander in and see how it works. Okay? So just take a minute to say, what do you already know about the networks of inquiry and innovation? Okay? Just to somebody around you. Okay. We always work with the wand.
Depending on who was involved.
Yeah.
It's a gift from our Prince Rupert teacher.
So that's what I'm interested in.
We always do a wand away at every session because we find that in every session there's somebody who needs some magic in their life. No matter how well things are going, it can be helpful. So how many people would say, just wave, that you know a little bit about the networks because you were part of it right from the beginning? And how many of you would say, you know very little about the networks and what our goals are? And how many of you would say that you're kind of in between those two? You think you know a little bit, but okay, so well, that's kind of fun. We're going to just tell you a bit. When the screen comes up, I can tell you the number of people involved. But because I also want to say that with the networks, and I think UBC is just making a terrific contribution to this right now. Part of what we want to do with the networks is help shift the culture of the province to be more teamwork oriented and less, I want to say bipolar, and cut that off the tape. Less bipolarized. Because we think that good principals and good teachers should be working together as a team. We happen to be passionate about public education. We're passionate about band schools. We consider that those are publicly funded Aboriginal schools. And we know that they're independent schools that are publicly funded too, and that we all broadly care about social responsibility. So that really matters to us. And I think one of the things that's not up there as a goal, but that really is critically important to Judy and I, and one of the reasons that we team teach and team lead is that we want to demonstrate, as we were saying to Meredith's students, that if you team teach, everything gets easier. You know, if you're a team, you can actually get equity, which is very hard to get if you just are individually wonderful. So that's sort of the area of our goals. You don't have to agree with us, but you know, we believe that.
So we've got 3 goals that have emerged through this 13-year journey with schools across the province. And the first one is our belief and our commitment to the importance of helping every learner across the stage with dignity, purpose, and options. And that's become really a driving passion for us. And we've seen schools across the province take that very seriously and are now doing everything that they can in a really, really systematic way to help kids make it. And we know that for learners, that if they don't, look at that, it's a miracle, that if they don't get high school graduation plus at least 2 years afterwards, it's got long-term implications for health, for the state of their family, for their contribution to society, and so on. So that's our first one. And we really love this image because this is a Vancouver school. This is Windermere Secondary, and this is the first graduate from Windermere to have Calculus 12 and a full ride scholarship to where? UBC, okay? As an Aboriginal young woman. And it was a school effect. It was the grade 8 teachers who were saying, what's the biggest obstacle to our kids being successful? Math 8. So then they formed a partnership with the elementary schools, and this is one of the results. So our message to our schools is, if we work together, we can create powerful new opportunities for kids.
We loved it. We got this image from the front page of the Vancouver Sun. You don't often see something about public schools on the front page of the Vancouver Sun. That's good. And this young woman and her mother just said it all from our perspective.
So that's number 1. The second one is this. Now, how many of you ever taught junior secondary or middle school? Now, that's where I started. I was a grade 8 English teacher for quite a while. And it was quite soul-destroying to hear kids say, what are we doing today? Is it on the test? Are we doing anything interesting? Okay. And contrast that with the bubbling enthusiasm of kids when they enter kindergarten. So it's our commitment, our drive to see, can we create learning environments in our schools where kids leave not as curious as when they arrive, but more curious. So that's number 2, and it's also our belief that it's impossible for kids to sustain their curiosity if they aren't surrounded by adults who are curious. So that's why our focus on commitment, or our focus on inquiry at the teacher level and at the school level, and opening that up so that kids are aware of what's going on, really creates that kind of ethos of curiosity and learning.
It was a teacher who said, gee, because our slide used to say, leaving as curious as when they arrived. And she said, isn't that like said in medicine, do no harm? Couldn't we up our aspiration levels? It was a terrorist teacher. That's how we love BC teachers, because they really teach us what we need to know. I think the other thing that's exciting, though, and is a UBC connection again, is Suzanne Hoffman was in the leadership program here, and she's now the superintendent in Langley. And you will see, Langley has a long tradition of inquiry, and you're going to see Langley embrace inquiry as a culture. They're starting an appreciative inquiry process first. Diane Turner, who is the superintendent in Delta, has probably got the finest inquiry model systemically district-wide in North America, possibly the world. We can't make that claim yet because we haven't been everywhere. But from a district perspective, they have embraced inquiry, and every school has dedicated time for a teacher leader as an inquiry coordinator, so they are taking it very seriously indeed. So our third goal is this, and it was fun talking to Meritus young people. We believe that as Canadians, that we need every learner with an understanding and a respect for Aboriginal perspectives. We also believe it's really important that every Canadian experience like ourselves or starting out is not racist about Indigenous perspectives. And we think the only way we can do that is that if we all step forward. Cynthia, I love the banners. I promise not to take them, but I want to find out how I can buy some, because we always take your book to every session and say, this is the most beautiful book that's ever been made, with mathematical understandings and Indigenous perspectives and culture woven together. Get it. We'd like to have the resources to give one to every.
Yeah. We also want to acknowledge the UBC connection here too. Sorry about that.
You have to have it?
Do I need it?
No.
No, it's according to, we're filming it.
Okay. So the UBC connection is that Trish Rossborough, who is a recent graduate from UBC, when she was the Director of Aboriginal Education provincially, she's now a faculty member at University of Victoria. But she met with Linda and I 5 years ago, and she said, you know, you've had some experience with hooking teachers through inquiry. Do you think we could do the same thing around Aboriginal education? And would there be a way of building on the network to say, can we get teachers to focus on the goals of the local enhancement agreements, which is a huge piece of work that's undertaken in districts. And often people are exhausted by the end of it, and there isn't the carryover to actually changing behaviors in classrooms. So that's where our work with the Aboriginal Enhancement Schools Network started. And we're really pleased this year that through the support of the Irving Barber Learning Center, there's also some grants to support schools looking at transitions for Aboriginal kids from at the transition point, so elementary to secondary and secondary to post-secondary. So that's a new aspect of inquiry. So those are our three big goals for the network. We also have a timeline, and we've set ambitiously that 2017 will be the time that we can say with some confidence that we're on the move as a province. And it's Canada's 150th birthday, and we figured that was a good way to celebrate it.
We thought we might go part-time now. Well, it won't matter.
Okay.
So those are our goals, and hopefully we've woven in a little bit of what we care about and what we do about. So again, just have a quick conversation with the person sitting next to you. You know, we started out being very passionate about formative assessment and getting the performance standards in use. We found inquiry was a powerful tool for approaching that. We found team inquiry actually shifted schools for the better. We started to study the Rockridges and the Glenviews around the province where they were taking this seriously over a period of time, Meritus School. And we learned some things from that. But just, again, make a connection. Does it make sense to you? Can you buy the idea that we could be the first educational establishment in the world to have 100% completion? We think that's an equity goal that we should be aiming for. We don't believe in SMART goals. SMART goals mean that 2% a year would get better, and sometime in the next century we would have equity, and we think that's too slow. We need to move more quickly around and keep the quality and get equity, like that young woman who's graduating. We don't care if everybody goes to the math department at UBC. We think some of them going to Red Seal chef training and other really fabulous things are good too. But we do want to see kids walking the stage so they'll have longer, healthier lives. We think that's an important goal. So just say something to the person next to you, and then we use a no hands up strategy. So we're going to say, will the person in the purple please tell us something intelligent that one of the partners said, okay? So say something to somebody and we'll ask you, we'll give you a minute, and then we'll ask you to tell the whole group, so it's a bit interactive. So Peter, you know some of the people in the room. Would you just pick somebody, and you don't have to say what you said, you can say something you heard or something you thought, or if you're really desperate, you can pass, but no. Yeah, just okay, Sydney. And in a healthy group, they establish eye contact.
Okay. Well, we discuss inquiry, and Bathsheba is teaching the inquiry seminar here at UBC, and we only just revised our program in 2012 to include inquiry, and she's telling us that she really thinks the students are walking the talk. So maybe we're having some effect here at UBC. And Vincent and I were talking about high school, teaching high school, and how kids go under the radar. So we're just kind of circling the topics.
Great, thank you.
Spiral, thank you. Choose somebody else.
Meredith.
Well, Claire and I were talking about that it might be difficult to achieve by 2017, but maybe for some of perhaps the Aboriginal learners, ELL, some of the newer immigrants, perhaps the window, if maybe not 2017, but maybe they know they can't do it in 7 years, but maybe they could do it in 10. Yeah.
We actually just want to know, I'm going to break in and say, we just want to know that we've got all the ingredients. We want to know what it looks like when systems get 100%. And so we know we won't achieve that, but we think, 2025 is too long. We want to have that sense of momentum around people taking their grade 8 intake really seriously and shifting things around the innovation work and the inquiry work as we move forward. Okay, well, we'll stop there, and, don't be afraid. It's no hands up except to ask a question. So if anytime you're curious about something, we'll be happy to stop and interact.
So we're just going to share a few things that we've learned from working with the network. The image, we discovered this image actually at Urban Fair a few years ago, and just thought it really represented what we're trying to do. And the image is called Floating Stones, and it's by a environmental photographer from New Zealand called Martin Hill. So just the notion of we're quite sure where the ripples are going to go. But over the last 13 years, we've had it at any time. About a third of the schools have been involved. We've had thousands of teachers, lots of school and district leaders. I mean, it's fun now for us to see Suzanne Hoffman, who was a grad student here at UBC, then a principal, and now is the superintendent at Langley, and taking that thinking to a large district. We've got 75 network leaders across the province, and they're all volunteers, from classroom teachers to superintendents. And this is a flat, the network is flat, so one of our kind of positions is leave your position at the door, leave your role at the door, and just come in as a learner. So we think that, we've probably had an impact on about 60,000 students. And we've also worked with 350 grad students, both from UBC and UVic, and now we're at VIU, as well as their coaches. And they're moving into positions of really being system shifters. Last year, through the AANDC, the Federal Department of Aboriginal and Northern Affairs, they had been providing a little bit of funding for the Aboriginal Network, and last year funded a research study. And Dr. Catherine McGregor from the University of Victoria was the author of the study. And I'll pass this to Linda, and I'll pass it around.
We know everybody will want to read the full study. It's hundreds of pages long, but there's also a 25-page summary. And that was really fun, with Cynthia's connections with Haida Gwaii. My favorite story there was a guy who had a clam digging metaphor, and he said when he first got to Haida Gwaii, he was digging clams, but he wasn't very skilled at it. And anyway, it was basically an inquiry story, how he got more and more powerful. The researcher was very taken with the story, Catherine McGregor at the University of Victoria, and she put it in the summary. And when the guy read it, and I think this is so network, he said, oh wow, there's somebody else in the province who digs clams. You can feel quite isolated in some of the smaller communities, and the network, I think the big message is that for some, you can feel quite isolated in big urban settings too. And we're just beginning to feel that the big urban settings are getting really, really interested, which really helps that UBC is so curious about this. So we want this work to continue. We're passionate about it.
So with the connection to inquiry, we've just drawn two teacher quotes from the study. And again, it's free, it's available on the website, but we just thought these really spoke to the heart of what we're trying to do. That unknowingly, as one teacher was getting curious, she was bringing some of her colleagues along with her. And that instead of saying, well, this program is good, this one isn't so good, anyway, it was really opening up their curiosity.
And if you read things, Michael Fullen and Andy Hargraves in their professional accounting books sometimes make comments about, particularly Andy in his sessions, about experienced teachers. That hasn't been true in my experience. I find some of the most excited teachers in the province are deeply experienced. They're in their last 5 years. They've discovered formative assessment and inquiry, and they're on fire. And actually, some of them are continuing to teach because they're so excited about what they're doing. So I think we need some research agenda around that in BC, because it just hasn't been our experience at all. And the same would be around formal leadership. I think inquiry suits our culture because it's not top down. And coming at people through their curiosity as a cure for boredom suits the BC culture better than telling people to do things. So, good. And Elaine Decker, who's got a long history here, is now working with Charlie Naylor, and they're working with Richmond. This is all a good conspiracy of breathing together.
So the next piece we want to do is just show what the roots for the spiral of inquiry are, because it's based on the case studies of BC, so the experience that we've had in working with all of these schools. But it was also done in collaboration with Helen Timperley from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and her work there. So Linda and I have had the good fortune of working quite closely with Helen, and it was together that we designed the spiral, and she gave us the permission to write it quickly to get it out to a BC audience, but we're also working with her on writing it for an international audience right now.
Yeah, she's right now in Wales with Andy Hargraves doing a study of the Welsh school system. So how many of you, just put your hands here, or straight up if you want to be non-Canadian. How many of you know who Helen Timperley is, and you've read her book on professional practice? Because she is the foremost researcher in the world around the difference that happens when you do professional learning in such a way that student outcomes change. She's #1 in the world. And she's a first-rate mind. So this was the research that she was involved with. Some of you will know the New Zealand school system. It's all self-managed. There are no school districts. So each school has its own school board. What has happened as a result of that policy brought in by a government of the day is that all the Samoan and Maori and Tongan kids tend to be in brown schools, and all of the European background people and Asian people tend to be in the upper decile schools. In other words, they are racially segregated and they are economically segregated. And the government knows that's a problem, and so they invested quite heavily in a literacy program for 3 years to say, you know what, we need to help all of the kids become more powerful in literacy. And so there were literacy coaches and literacy facilitators and literacy researchers.
So the schools were involved for a 2-year period, so over the 6 years, all schools were involved. And her research interest became, what happens when the project is over and the funds dry up? So that was what really sort of sparked our curiosity.
We think this is a fabulous question because we're in year 2 of a major $10 million literacy initiative in our province right now. And we know that won't be sustained forever. It will be probably, if we can sustain it for 3 years, we think that will be good.
So this is the name of the report, her paper that came out. And from it, there were 2 key research findings. So this was the first one, that schools that had been involved in this, if they continued to apply what they'd learned during the project, continued to make gains for new kids coming in. Okay.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, think BC, right? There's thousands of teachers right now involved in early primary inquiry-based literacy investigations.
But here's the really big finding. That when schools took an inquiry-based approach, not just fidelity to the strategies, but really taking an inquiry approach to the persistent issues that were taking place in the school, that they didn't just maintain, they improved their learning gains over time. So that just redoubled our interest and in our belief that we were on solid territory by engaging teachers in inquiry.
Now, we're in a research institution, but not every practitioner thinks it matters that much what happened in New Zealand. We think it does because New Zealand is about the same size. I think the leading people have the same passion around fair play and equity and a kind of go for it spirit. Here's the question, and this time you are going to stand up and talk to somebody else for a minute. Somebody intellectually or even, attractive to you in some other way, perhaps artistically. We'll use multiple intelligences. Do you accept the idea that this research shows that if we help teachers become inquiry-minded in a systematic and coherent way, that there'll be more powerful learning gains that will be sustained over time instead of disappear when the initiative disappears? Because that's the finding, and that's really the thinking in spirals of inquiry. That if collectively we do 6 things coherently over time, including with teacher candidates, that we will create a system that will get us those powerful, difficult goals achieved in our lifetimes. Okay? So we're not going to, that you can really have a free conversation, but just stand up and talk to somebody else in the room and stay standing, because sitting is really bad for our brains. And just take 1 minute, find somebody, introverts go first, find a partner, and just say, yeah, I accept that notion, or I wonder if there's something about being down under that's different, okay? Those 2 findings, do you accept them? Would they be true for here?
Yes.
We're just going to leave those questions open to you to consider. Helen's findings that if we maintain a systematic fidelity to the program, we're going to make a difference. If we approach it through inquiry, we're going to make a bigger difference. Okay. So, yeah, at least that was what she found. So there's another just piece of information that we thought might be interesting for you to know about, that this work is now having some global connections. In 2009, we hosted, as part of ICSE, which is the International Congress of School Effectiveness and Improvement, a conference in Vancouver. And at that conference, 25 BC teachers presented their inquiry work. David Istance, who is the head of the OECD project research study on innovative learning environments, was there. And he was very impressed by the quality of the work being done by BC teachers. And so he invited Linda and I to be part of the OECD international study. So we have been, we've learned a lot from that, and it's been quite exciting. And on the website, you'll see case studies from BC schools, as well as case studies from schools in 40 participating countries. The study is in the 3rd phase now, the final phase, and they've identified, they being the OECD research team, 5 countries to be part of a learning laboratory phase. And BC, you may not know it's a country, but BC has been invited as one of those 5 countries. And from a BC perspective is pretty cool, because often the discourse internationally about Canadian education is Ontario. And so this time it's BC. So here are the 5 countries that are involved. BC, Peru, New Zealand, South Africa, and Belgium, French Belgium. And the focus in BC is on inquiry, networks, and leadership development. And how can we shift the system in a focused, concerted effort in those 3 areas. So kind of stay tuned. We're working hard to figure this out, and there will be a conference next We hold a symposium every May for the network schools, and some of the team from these other countries will be there. And there's some discussion of a bigger conference next October as well. So we think it's interesting work just to pay attention to.
We ask our graduate students to become very familiar with this book, The Nature of Learning, which has the international research, Jim Spillane, Dylan Willem, people on social and emotional learning. There's a final chapter called Future Directions for Learning Environments in the 21st Century, in which they define the 7 big learning intentions, let me preface it differently. I think one of the reasons the primary program has always been so good in BC is because the primary teachers have stayed true to the learning principles. And having 7 learning principles seems to really help. And somebody's got the summary there's a sort of a beautiful summary of Cole's notes, because I brought a copy anyway. We can send you one electronically. The 7 learning principles are really important, we think, to shape our innovation work going forward. And one of the reasons we tried to write the book quickly is now that the system has opened up, and it has, which is exciting, there's a lot of opportunity for incoherence and even a little opportunity for stupidity. And although that can be healthy, failing is good, it's part of inquiry. We think coherence is also useful, and that's why we're excited about teacher candidates getting involved in an inquiry process that has some similarities to really thoughtful districts who are trying to move things forward in an open-minded and open source kind of way. So we think that the framework, the second framework we try to teach all the network people and all of our leadership people is having these 7 learning principles as a foundation is a powerful way of checking if we're on the right track. Because not everybody, when your teacher candidates go on, not everybody is doing social and emotional learning, not everybody is doing cooperative learning, not everybody is encouraging metacognition and self-regulation, not everybody is using formative assessment. And the thing that schools that we're the least good at is connecting with our broader community and interconnecting across disciplines, which is why we love the math book so much, because it's a living artifact of greater connectivity between all kinds of things, the marine environment and mathematical understandings. Right? So how many people have seen those 7 learning principles before? I call them the transversals. Well then, we will send to you.
That'd be great. Yeah.
It comes across better if you read it in color. It costs money to read it in color, but it really, it is more powerful, I think, in particular for some communities.
Why do they call it a transverse?
Sorry?
Why is it a transverse?
Transversal means that it cuts across the different research strands. So there's a chapter by John Bransford on brain-based learning. There's a chapter by Dylan William on formative assessment. So then what the research team did was step back from these kind of major research focus and say, what are the principles that cut across? So transversal is kind of a clunky language, but it's 7 big learning principles. And we've been working with them for the last couple of years, and they make sense to classroom teachers. They can get their heads around them. And this year with the network, we're encouraging schools to take one of those learning principles and make that the focus for their inquiry. And again, we're delighted that Robin's here now teaching formative assessment, because one of the big the learning principles is feedback from the learner to the teacher and the teacher to the learner. So it's just a way of organizing what is known about learning in a way that really makes sense to.
I think the other thing is, it's called innovative learning environments. It's not called schools. So there's international interest. We're still fond of schools doing that. We spend so much time in them. But to kind of open up the learning so that we're doing more of our learning on the Musqueam territory and less in buildings all the time. And can we be, one of our keen leaders is in Invermere. She's taken her kindergarten class into the seniors' home for a day a week. And those kindergarten children have sort of stage to sit in, and so now they're in grade 3. They've just stayed one day a week because they enjoyed their contact with seniors so much. It was so powerful. The seniors have gone from being nonverbal to verbal, and the young people have learned a tremendous amount about how to be a human being in the world, and their literacy has improved. This would be a really good example of an innovative learning environment in our culture, not so much in an Indigenous culture where that's been a way of life, but in many places that would be a really good example of an innovative learning environment.
So then we get to the book, which again we're really grateful to the fact that it seems to be resonating with you and with student teachers, and meeting with Merida's class that they were really working through some of the big ideas. And
Can you just go back for a second?
Sure.
I just want to say, every time 50 people buy a book, because all of the proceeds are going to Aboriginal Enhancement micro-inquiries, every time 50 people buy a book, there's a $500 grant to a school somewhere in BC. Not necessarily serving all Aboriginal kids, but serving kids who need to learn and have a greater Aboriginal understanding. Some of those schools are in Vancouver, because Vancouver has sort of come to this party recently in a big focused way. And as Judy said, I think at the beginning, we now have enough, well, maybe in Merida's class, we now have enough money from this process that we can fund 70 books, or 70 schools this coming year. And money's hard to find from governments and other places, so we're really proud of the partnership. And we also are pleased, I think the job action was difficult in schools, and we wanted to partner with the Principals Association because they have a really good editor, Richard, who's wonderful, and he's done a really good job of making it accessible.
so the big thing for us was to get this book written fairly quickly and get it out to BC teachers. And we approached the Principals Association, as Linda said, and asked them if they'd be willing to partner with us on this. It's because in Ontario, if you take a look at the Ontario Principals Council, they've been doing this for quite a while. Michael Fullan, some of his original works were published by the Ontario Principals. And they were a little bit leery. They weren't sure whether they were going to take a bath on the finances on it. So we had a couple of sort of antsy meetings, but it's worked out, and it's now in the 5th printing. So they're happy, and schools are gaining as a result. We also learned from the early days of the network how important microcredit grants are. It's not a lot. We've been able to give $500 grants, sometimes, on a really flush year, $1,000. But that $500 provides the opportunity for teachers without any constraints to make decisions about where they're going to invest the money. And it's really, really important.
It forms a small form of recognition for the Brooke Moores. We have a lot of educational geniuses in our province, and it just is a way of saying thank you. It always comes at the end, it never comes at the beginning. It's not a startup grant, it's a thank you very much, Meredith and your colleagues, for pursuing this math question over time, and for making it public. We're public education, but we're awfully shy as Canadians, and I think we think it's important to put your work out there.
So this is the spiral that hopefully looks vaguely familiar. And what we found and what we're finding is that this has applicability at the individual student level. We've got teachers, particularly some really sharp teachers in Nanaimo, that are developing a process for applying this spiral to individual student inquiries. It applies at the individual classroom level, at the grade level or department level, at whole school level, and increasingly at the district level, that we have a number of districts that are now taking this approach. Instead of doing school growth plans or kind of traditional board goal setting, they're approaching it using this framework.
And finding it much more satisfying, at least that's been the feedback that we've had, because it seems to be more coming from within and less feeling like it's coming from somewhere else, which I think, and we have colleagues at the ministry, dear colleagues, who've said, oh, we know how we could wreck this, we could mandate it, which we appreciate them understanding that, because that would not be good in our setting. We like to tease a little bit. We say sometimes in the scanning process at the universities we spend too long there, maybe a lifetime. Thinking broadly, really scanning. In teaching, we tend to go to action really fast. So we're trying to slow ourselves down as practitioners a little bit and scan and then focus. And Helen's research is that the focus does not have to be phrased as a question. Our experience is all with getting schools and individuals, but she said sometimes the question is too constraining. It has the answer built into the question, and it takes people down the wrong path. So we have great dialogues, and if we can get Helen to BC this spring, we'll make sure that we're in touch and that we have a dialogue with you about that.
I think we've come, she has influenced our thinking, and we've shifted the getting the focus, whether it's on self-regulation or kids being able to ask their own questions or whatever it is more powerful than if we do this, will this happen? It can be too narrow.
It can be too constraining.
Yeah. The hunch part was also a major contribution from Helen's work. And this is really the part of intuition, and teachers are responding very positively to this. And it requires putting some of our long-held assumptions on the table, because it's not saying what's leading to this situation outside the school, but what's leading to this situation that we, the professionals here, how are we contributing to it? So a very specific example from an elementary school in Terrace that we just love the orientation that this school is taking. It is a about 90% Aboriginal kids. It would be an inner city school by Vancouver designation. It was a school that had French immersion. It was taken out so that anybody with social capital had really left the school. New principal, vice principal team came in. They engaged in a scanning process. And what came up repeatedly from the teachers was, kids don't come to school on time, they're not ready to learn, and why don't you do something about it? And they were able to step back and use this process to, when they got to the hunch part of it, to say, what is it that we're doing? How do we start our day? Do we start it in a way that actually helps kids be ready to learn and getting them here on time? So what they did last year was that they changed the start of their day. Now at 9 o'clock, or 5:02, or 5 after, whenever the kids get there, they come into the school, they go right to the gym. There's coffee and cookies available for the parents, who often haven't had anything to eat themselves. They go into the gym and they dance. And 4 days a week they dance, and they have a different theme each day. Their favorite day is Retro Day, when they do the chicken dance and the Macarena. Then they have a story. Then they go to their class where they have a snack. They have a healthy snack. And then they start their reading program. They've seen a huge difference in what's going on with their kids. But it required teachers to leave that assumption that you've got to teach reading first thing in the day when the kids are fresh.
And when teachers are fresh.
And when teachers are fresh.
Many of us have done.
So it requires trust, and it requires a bit of a leap of faith in here. And then another part that is often missed is the new learning. That as teachers we go from, there's an issue, okay, we've got to figure it out, now we're just going to do something about it. And we're saying, let's make sure that in this process we're actually building in new learning, however that may take place.
Book studies and video clubs are coming back into life. I guess we can partly thank Oprah, not in education, but people are finding that a powerful mechanism. And we do think that Carol Dweck's book Mindset is a book that everybody should read as a matter of fact, for formative assessment. I just want to say one thing, and then we'll draw it to a close. Clearly, as we used to say in the writing process, these stages are iterative. It's scanning your broad and focusing your, more convergent. At punching, you're opening yourself up to intuition, but you're also opening yourself up to professionally to saying the decisions that we make them with goodwill, and as we learn more about the importance of physical activity to self-regulation and early in the day and preventing anxiety and depression, let's explore that. New learning, we don't say pro-D, new professional learning, taking action, but checking is happening all the way along. And if we would make one plea to those of you who are using the book, we would say, please read and use chapter 4 with beginning teachers, because it's Kim Schoner-Reichel's research. Can you name 2 people in this setting who believe you'll be a success in life? We have to make that a way of life. We have to make the answer to that 100%. And kids have to be able to say, yes, I believe Ms. Fenton believes in me, and here's how I know. Because some of our kids are saying things, well, Ms. Fenton's paid to care about me. And so it's an instrumental approach, not a real feeling of caring, and that really matters. And then the 3 metacognitive questions. And that's where the spiral of inquiry and formative assessment are one, because you cannot answer these questions if you don't know what you're learning, if there are no criteria, and if you don't know what your next step is. And so that chapter to us is, we think that we could actually, in terms of the forum that you had, Maria, we could get learning assistance teachers and the 8,000 kids who were in care and actually build a system around those questions, those 4 questions, that would answer the equity issues by using the brain power of BC teachers. So we think they're powerful, we think they can be used at a system level as well as an individual level, and we really want to make those questions a way of life. Because you know, you're in an academic environment. People are interested in knowledge animation. It often doesn't get past AERA or C or whatever into classrooms, and it's so critically important that it's a back and forward flow in both directions. Fine teaching, informing academic thinking, and current research and understandings influencing our schools. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. And we were happy to take any questions that you might have or hang around for a little while afterwards if you'd like. And I just want to come back to the beginning and say how really what an honor it is to be here on our beginning term. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Peter Grimmett was my advisor when I did my master's.
Hey, I dated Neville Scarf's son for a little while.
This is really going back.
Okay, well,
Deep roots.
Anyway, thank you very much. We'll send the PowerPoint and our contact information, our blog information to Wendy for you to have. And also we'll send you a copy of that Practitioner's Guide to the Nature of Learning, because you may find it
Very
useful.
useful. And just so you know, everywhere we go, we're very proud of the work that's happening at UBC on many, many different levels. And it's exciting. I was I think in this room when the dean was asking a really fabulous question during one of those on Saturday. It was about embodied learning. It was a different kind of question, but the quality of his attention and focus was really significant. And he wasn't just doing a drive-by. He was intellectually curious, and you could just feel the energy that came from that. So somebody needs a wand in their life.
Who would like a wand? She can tell.
You can tell.
Well, on behalf of all of us at UBC, Linda and Judy, thank you so much. You're clearly impassioned about learning, and that's what you communicate to us, and I think that's a wonderful gift. And that's really what all of this is about, is enhancing our learning. So thank you. We can stay for, we have the room booked for a little bit longer for any of us who would like to stay and just chat and ask questions. Again, Linda and Judy have donated their fee to the Enhancement Fund, so we are, in a sense, contributing to furthering your good work. So thank you very, very much on behalf of all of us.